welcome Hoosier fans to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 219th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 719th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of July 8th, 2021. I am your host, the coach, Brian Tonsoni. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred last Thursday, July 1st, when all Indiana athletes and athletes across the country were permitted to pursue name, image, and likeness deals for their personal brands. This is a big change in the college landscape and provides opportunities for athletes to earn money for the time and effort they put forth while on campus. Indiana athletics has been ahead of the game for over a year in preparation for the NIL activity, contacting and contracting with companies and talking inside about videos and pictures and Instagram stories and all of that for a year. This is something to be very proud of as a fan of Indiana University. Open Doors provides Indiana athletes with the assistance and direction that will be needed to ensure that the NIL is a positive experience for both the players and the university. The objective, however, is still to win games and be competitive on the playing courts and the playing fields. Indiana, I believe, is poised to ensure that this happens while helping athletes move forward in their careers, both academically and financially. These are good times. Welcome to the NIL world of college athletics. Okay, let me introduce my esteemed co-host for tonight. First to my left.
You'll have fun. The Hoosiers make the tourney again. Fun. You'll have fun. The Hoosiers make the tourney again. Fun.
It's good to have Andy Bottoms back. Well, we took the July 4th weekend off, so welcome to everyone back after 2 weeks. And it's nice to get back and talk a little bit of college basketball, especially Indiana basketball. Andy, your thoughts on this July night?
Yeah, my thoughts on the NIL stuff, and I know we're going to talk about that a decent amount tonight. But I think our thoughts are relatively similar just in terms of how much IU has been a little bit on the leading edge of this. I think they announced even when it was coming that they were putting together a team of folks together with that Galen has been involved in as well, just really trying to get out in front of it and educate the student athletes on what the options are. And you've seen a lot of posts, I think, from multiple sports teams that I follow on social media this week, having Altius, I'm not sure what the right way to say that the company is, kind of just educating the players on what that, what their options are and kind of how to navigate through that. So I think that is an exciting thing and something that is a potential, selling point from a recruiting standpoint of just the framework that IU is trying to put in place to make those folks successful. And I think a good example of that is Miller Kopp. He came out last week and had a series of tweets and just kind of talked about how he, what his goals were with it, which were 1, be authentic, 2, tell my story, 3, engage, and 4, align, and kind of went into a little bit of detail on those. And, so this week he's put out his first vlog that was interesting and starts to give a little bit of behind the scenes type stuff that I think we as fans and other fans of the program have wanted to get. So I'm interested to see where that goes, but it seems like he's taken a pretty tactful approach to what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. So I think that has some benefit. And again, if you see, more players doing things like that, other things that give you opportunities to get to know these guys a little bit and what they believe in and what they endorse and some of those things, I think that's a positive thing for the program. We've talked so many times about that of, you see some of these features that get written about other places and other schools give additional access and things like that, that really allow you to get to know these guys. At least in Miller's case, feels like it's a chance to get to know him and get some behind the scenes stuff. So I think that can only be a positive for the program and things like that. So interested to see where it goes. There was a flurry of activity right at the beginning, and now I think everybody's settling in, trying to figure it out, and it'll be an interesting discussion as we talk about it a little bit later as well.
Yeah, just it opened up, and you saw a lot of stuff hit in this first week, and I just think it's good. I know as an old veteran, I like the way things were, and it's kind of hard to move forward. But there's so much money in the college athletics right now that I think it's good to open up and allow some of these athletes to benefit from the hard work that they put in, and be able to do some things that other students are able to do. One of my Delphi graduates is a freshman at IU, and he's running a paving company this summer, making money so he can go back to IU and spend money in the Bloomington community. That hasn't been available for athletes to make that kind of money. So I'm on board, and we'll talk more about that in segment 2. But here's what we're going to cover this week. We have some Hoosier headlines. Our main topic will be the NIL, the opening week of NIL. And then, of course, we'll answer your questions, have some subscriber shout-outs, and in segment 3. All of that coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. We don't have an advertisement for you, but I will take the time to say take care of Hoosier Nation. Put all the differences aside. Take care of each other. Make sure you're supporting everyone. We the Tonsonis, have had a great amount of support this summer as we face some health issues in our family, and I look forward to passing that on. So I challenge everyone, as long as it's not Purdue people, make sure you're taking care of Indiana people, but if they have some connection to Purdue, you just let someone else take care of them. But seriously, think about ways that you can reach out to people in your community, in the Hoosier community, and do something for them. That would be great if we all did that. So here we go. Let's hit some Hoosier headlines. Scheduling news: IU draws Syracuse for the ACC Big Ten Challenge. That'll be an interesting matchup in year 1 of Coach Woodson's regime. And then a lot of decisions about who's staying and going in the Big Ten. We'll run through them here real quick. Ohio State, Liddell stays. Washington is gone. Iowa loses Joe Wieskamp. Illinois, Kofi Coburn is staying and not going to the NBA, but he's in the transfer portal, so he may leave Illinois. Rutgers had a big week with Geo Baker and Ron Harper coming back. Maryland, Daryl Morcell transfers to Marquette. Wiggins stays in the draft, so they lost a couple players there. And Michigan, Dickinson returns, and they had a transfer from, I think, Coastal Carolina. I don't know his name, but he pulled his name out of that. Officially, Miller Kopp also pulled his name out of the draft as well. So we're starting to see the rosters solidify. I'm not sure how many more decisions will come down, but I do think some of those will affect the competitiveness of the Big Ten. I think Rutgers gets better, and I think Maryland and Illinois drop a little bit with some of those decisions. So we can talk about that. Jalen Hood-Schifino, the number 26 recruit, took an official visit in late June, and from all reports, it went well, as a lot of these visits are going well. Pretty impressive from Coach Woodson, his start in the recruiting trail. Remember, he's not going to win all of them. He still could do a good job having them on campus and talking to them, but it seemed like when people are coming to Indiana, they're pretty impressed. It's just Coach Woodson just got in the game here recently. He's going up against longer recruiting periods and other big schools. Stick with the belief with Coach Woodson. I think he'll pull down some good recruits recently. Andy, of those headlines, what grabs your attention right off tonight?
Well, I mean, most of it's the Big Ten stuff. I'll touch quickly on the Big Ten ACC thing. You know, we had some discussion about it, I think, the last time that you and Ryan and I were on. So our notion that IU would get a home game in that, and the kind of alternating piece of things, did not happen. So they go on the road, be a tough environment, play Syracuse. It'll be obviously an interesting test based on history in terms of what Mike Woodson's offense looks like against the zone and things like that. But at least you've got Xavier Johnson, a guy who's a little bit familiar with it from playing in the ACC, and so that'll be a good early test. We talked about wanting him to be able to have at least one true road game. This one will certainly fit the bill for that, and should provide a pretty good early test for the team. So go ahead.
I will tell you that, and you know this too, Syracuse, if you're going to get Syracuse, get them early. That doesn't mean that Indiana's going to go into the Carrier Dome and win, because the 2-3 zone is tough to prepare for, especially the way they play it, and they do a good job. But it seems they get more in tune defensively as the year goes on. They get more in tune offensively once they find their shooter and get in a rhythm. And then they make that late run from us bracketologists, whether they're in or out, and at what seed every year. Syracuse, they seem to go on a run late in the year. So if there's any time for Indiana to play a Syracuse, it's probably in November, where you might be getting them, just figuring out how to put all the pieces together. Still will be a tough road environment for the Hoosiers. Thoughts on
one thing you like potentially. Sorry, give me a second. You go ahead.
It's not the team that I wanted to see in the ACC challenge. I don't mind playing tougher teams, but that zone, I could have done without that for Coach Woodson in year 1, year 2 or 3 would have been good. But again, don't back away from a challenge.
Yeah, I think one thing that may work in IU's favor is a lot of times the zone, Syracuse prone to giving up offensive rebounds. Having a guys like Trace and Race, I think that at least might play a little bit into IU's strength in that regard. But and then in terms of the Big Ten stuff, I think most of those moves were, as I look over the list, not terribly surprising. Some the Ohio State stuff, I think that's where most people had netted out that Washington was probably going to go after he performed well in some of the pre-draft stuff, and Liddell was going to stay. I think Wieskamp, I don't know that one shocked me at all, but I would certainly takes a pretty big step back in that regard. And then the Kofi Cockburn piece is interesting. I was listening to a couple of different podcasts today in the college basketball world, both the CBS one and the 3-Man Weave. And, they both talked a little bit about similar things. There's a lot of ties with him to Kentucky based on the assistants going there, but they also picked up Oscar Tshiebwe from West Virginia in the middle of the year last year. And so it's like, are you really going to go there and fight for minutes and not play as much as you would think that you would, even if you don't want to go back to Illinois, where you'd really be, be him and Curbelo. It would seem like an odd choice to go to Kentucky for him from a long-term move standpoint. Obviously some familiarity there with those guys. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. Rutgers, I think I speak for most IU fans when, I don't know that I'm surprised that Baker a little bit. I don't know when the Harper news came through. I think IU fans have probably seen enough of those two guys over the past few years, and their shot making at times. So I wasn't overly thrilled with that, although they lost some other pieces with Jacob Young and Miles Johnson both being gone. The Maryland one, I think, probably is the team that slides the most in the standings. At least you really had that. Their kind of trio of guys. In large part, last year was Morcell, Wiggins, and then Eric Ayala. Dante Scott was good as well. And so they lose two of those 3 wing guys. They did pick up Wahab from Georgetown and Fats Russell from Rhode Island. So they still got a decent lineup, but I think their depth certainly takes a hit with losing 2 of those 3 guys, as opposed to maybe you lose one of them and return 2 of the 3 as opposed to just one. So I think they're probably the one that dips a little bit the most, where I think if everybody comes back or most of those guys come back, they're maybe in that at least in that top tier discussion with Michigan, Ohio State, Purdue. Now I think they probably slide back to that next tier with, maybe Michigan State. Maybe that's where IU falls in, some of those kinds of things. So I think they're the one that's probably impacted the most by the departures. But a lot of moving pieces. I think that at least all the draft decisions are made. You still got transfer portal stuff to deal with as you start figuring out what rosters are. But we're getting closer to having an idea who's actually going to suit up for which team.
As I look at it, I agree with you that Maryland, in some places, has been projected to be a top 1 or 2 team in the Big Ten if everyone came back. Well, everyone didn't come back. So I do think they slide down into that middle tier. As you said, I think Rutgers is the team that everyone had pushed down to the bottom tier, the last 5 or 6 in the Big Ten, without Baker and Harper, that they get those 2 back. They still lose the big center, Miles Johnson, to UCLA. But Rutgers, if they get fans back in the RAC, that's a tough environment, and they just are a physical, tough team that I don't think they're going to be a top-tier team, but they can beat you at home and put pressure on you at the road. I think they move up into a tournament contention team with that news. The Illinois stuff is Kofi Cockburn was great at Illinois. I don't understand that move. And then you wonder, what's going on there with, Coach Underwood. I think he does a good job. I know he's real tough, and he is a little bit of a throwback coach. But that's a surprising transfer to me. I think Wieskamp pushes Iowa down. I think they're just going to struggle without their top outside scorer, and obviously Luka Garza is gone. But I think Ohio State, Michigan, those moves were thought. I still think they're going to be top of the Big Ten. There's just some interesting things. I don't think we've really discussed the stuff that's gone on with Greg Gard at Wisconsin. The taped recording that came out from a coach. I think that absolutely stinks when you have a meeting with your team and someone tapes recorded it and set out. I think that's awful, and that stuff should be kept in-house. But I also think that you can watch Wisconsin start to struggle here, because I don't know how you recover. If 2 years in a row you're having meetings and people are transferring out, and you apologize 2 years in a row, and you didn't start making changes, and a predominant number of players on your team think that they're not valued. That's not just one guy not playing or one guy you got mad at and kicked out of practice one day. That's going to be hard to go into homes and recruit to Wisconsin. And they never pulled the greatest athletes out anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see what goes on at Wisconsin. So, yeah, I echo there's a lot of things, coming and going, and things will start to settle here as we get to August and September when school starts. And then the other thing I'll ask you, Andy, about is everyone loves their transfers and doesn't like the other team's transfers, right? So when you look at the Indiana Hoosiers, you're like, oh, this transfer can do this, and this transfer, we got an influx of talent. And then you look at, Fats Russell at Maryland. He's not really good. He comes from Rhode Island, and the Wahib guy from Georgetown couldn't play, so he's not going to help them. The interesting thing from my vantage point, and I'm interested to see your take on this, is when those games start in November, to see which transfers meet those expectations and really add value to these programs, and which ones come in and don't get it done. And obviously the teams that made the better decisions and the players move forward are going to reap the benefits of it and move up the standings.
Yeah, it's a lot like recruiting, right? Where guys could be really talented, but if they don't end up in the right system or a system that suits what they can do, the typical response can be, well, this guy's just overrated. He shouldn't have been ranked that high anyway, when maybe he didn't do a good job of figuring out where he needed to go and how he could best utilize his ability. And I think the transfer stuff is the same, where you try to envision, who's going to fit into these different systems. And in some cases, you don't really have a great handle on that. And you also have guys commit with different impressions of who's going to be there. So, the guys going to Maryland as an example, do they have some inclination that those guys are going to be gone, or do them not being there now make things a little bit harder for Wahab? Or does that put more pressure on Fats Russell to do things that maybe he doesn't, didn't want to do from an efficiency standpoint? He hasn't been an overly efficient player because he's used a ton of possessions at Rhode Island. Does all of a sudden is he thrust back into that now, a higher level of play in the Big Ten and some of those kinds of things? And then, I forget what the example the guys on the 3-man weave threw out. Oh, I know what it was. It was Kansas. So they pick up Remy Martin from Arizona State, and they got a transfer, Ochefu, I think, or Shefu, somebody they got from Creighton.
Drake.
No, Drake. Sorry. And a school that was blue and white. I was close. Yeah. And they got him. He comes in thinking he's going to step into minutes, and all of a sudden Ogbaji comes back. Remy Martin transfers in. Like, what does that look like? So I think some of these are really hard to tell, that can look really good at the time when they commit. And then once the dust settles and you figure out the pieces who are actually around them, it might look a whole lot different than some of those things. But I think there will, some of these transfers, I think Wahab has a chance to be an important player there, really give them a post presence. He played well as Georgetown got into the tournament by playing well in the Big East tournament. I'm a little bit more skeptical on Russell just because of his efficiency numbers at a lower level of basketball and some of those things. But yeah, you don't really You don't really know. You got guys that can be under recruited. You think of Duncan Robinson even coming in and playing so well at Michigan. He transferred from a whole different level of college basketball, but he was a perfect fit for what they needed. They ran stuff for him, and now he's making a ton of money in the NBA as a spot up shooter and doing those kinds of things. So it's really all about fit as much as it is anything. And, some of these you can't really assess the fit as well. You can assess the system fit, but you can't really assess their role fit until all these other dominoes fall, there's fewer left to fall, but there's still some.
And that's why I think it's great to have the 2 games in the Bahamas for the Indiana program. All the coaches working together and figuring that out. All the players coming in. So you have a new system with a bunch of transfers. I think you get those 10 extra practices. So inside the program, you can figure that out before us analysts do. So
I think with IU, and we'll use this to. I'd like all people in the chat talking about Purdue a little bit. I think with IU, there was a lot of roster turnover, but there hasn't been any changes here in the last. I don't remember when Durr signed, but that was really kind of the last moving piece. So you're tempted at times to now sit there, and I think some people could sit back and be like, "Man, it'd be great if we had a scholarship open because this guy just went in the portal, or this guy did whatever." Right. Well. It might be true, but it also is good where the roster's been a little bit solidified. Granted, these guys haven't all played together, but you've been able to get everybody on campus and start to build some of that without those unknown pieces of, hey, tomorrow somebody else is walking in the door because he was out there. And I think some of that speaks a little bit to the some of the Purdue stuff out there, where of any of the Big Ten teams, they've had easily the least roster turnover since last year, at least from teams that were toward the top of the league. And I think that almost automatically puts them toward the top of the projections this year, where they had, I think Ivy might have put his name in the draft for a little bit, but didn't leave it there. Travion Williams went in, but I think everybody's impression was that he was going to come back. So they really have a lot of continuity, and that's been one of the things that just year over year, as Painters kind of had the program, has been a success. One of their success factors in terms of being able to have some of that consistency. So IU's had it for about 4 weeks, I guess, probably with the players there. But I guess when you compare it to some of these other teams, that there's still a little bit of a revolving door, maybe even having that little bit of time where you can build up to those games in August and then build from those until the season actually starts, that can be some benefit as well.
And we're all just overexcited with Coach Woodson and the new staff and the new direction of seeing how this all plays out. But we're starting to see what the competition's going to be like, and that's always good. So coming up on Assembly Call Radio, we're going to talk name, image, and likeness from a couple guys that aren't necessarily lawyers or agents and well-versed in it, but we're going to talk about what we've heard and seen. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, good first segment.
Yeah, Big Ten's going to be interesting with all the. I think you can start to see the tiers for him, but I agree with you. I think those guys help Rutgers a whole lot, where they don't fall off nearly as much as people thought. Because at least you got those guys to kind of lead, and you can put some pieces around them. But yeah, I think Iowa drops. I don't know that anybody played a big enough role last year. Yeah, I agree. Especially,
Illinois drops.
If doesn't come back.
I still think they're going to be okay. It's just like any team that loses their top. If Kofi leaves, you lose your top 2 players who everything was built around. You had the closer, you had the post guy. Yes, you got talent coming back and transferring in, but I think they're going to drop a little bit from that top tier, possible Big Ten. I saw Ohio State's non-conference schedule. It was published. I saw that on a tweet today, and they have 5 of their 11. Against quality opponents. And that's always a conversation. We had that a while back when we talked about who we'd like to see play. And Indiana right now has 3 quality opponents with the all the matchups with St. John's and Syracuse now and Notre Dame. So you have those 3, and it'll be interesting to see what those other 4. That was the last show that we did, Andy. But I would suppose you're going to see at least 1 or 2 more higher level teams to be announced here. I'm trying to think what else has popped in college basketball since then, other than the return to recruiting. We're not going to spend a lot of time on unless we have a question in section 3, but I know I listened to a podcast today about coaches enjoying getting back to live evaluation and the difference between watching on tape, which is nice, but seeing on the thing that was interesting to me in this podcast was they like to see the off the action stuff, the how you react to teammates. One guy said, I liked watching warm-up lines. And I know I said that in the past, that when I go to games, I like to get there early and see how players prepared to get to play. And that tells me the difference between someone who's going to, just get what their talent has versus someone who maximizes. So you got the recruiting trail opening up and college coaches getting back on there. You have the NIL stuff we're going to talk about, a little bit of scheduling happening. So a lot of things happening in college basketball.
Yeah, I'm curious when the rest of the IU schedule get announced. I think seems like more and more of the teams are kind of trickling out, but we'll see when that might be, because there's obviously a few slots still to fill in. I'll be interested in Ohio State. I mean, Washington was obviously from a scoring standpoint really important for them. I think decision-making, shot selection wasn't always his strength, but he was a guy that could go get you a basket and could do some things with the ball in his hands. I think more runs through Liddell now, who's really good, but having a guard that you can really trust with that will be, or not having him will be interesting. Yeah, because Wheeler is not that guy from Penn State. So yeah, I'll be interested to kind of see what they do. I think they take a step back offensively a little bit, but I think they'll still be really good. Just track record wise, hard to poke too many holes in what he's done there.
To me right now, just Purdue stands out. Unfortunately, I think Michigan does with Dickerson coming back. They've lost some players too, but they had some good recruiting classes. So that's Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State tier. And then you got a whole bunch of people. I'm glad we have Trace Jackson Davis, because he's of all the players coming back, I think in that mid tier, one of the better ones. And if our transfers, can do some of the things we believe they can do, then I think that sees us in a tournament in March. But yeah, I think there's some teams that obviously with the transfer portal and stuff, I think take a step back. So we'll see. All right, let's roll to this NIL. We went 22 minutes there, so if we have to cut short or we feel like we're running out of stuff to say, we can just go to the segment 3.
Yep, that works.
All right, here we go.
Hi, this is Jawan Morgan. What's the only thing better than getting IU's first triple-double in 47 years? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join Jared, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back to the assembly call. How do you keep up with the fire hose of information that comes out almost every day about IU basketball? It's crazy during the off season, and it's even crazier during the season. Well, we've got your back. We send out a free weekly email newsletter on Sunday mornings. It rounds up the most important and interesting IU basketball stories from the previous week to keep you up to date on your Hoosiers. Over 8,000 of your fellow IU fans are on the list, and we want you to be on there too. So go to join.assemblycall.com to subscribe for free now. That's join.assemblycall.com. You can also text IU to 66866. That's IU to 66866. Okay, I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with Andy Bottoms. And besides the opening up of the recruiting and coaches back in gyms across the country, the name, image, and likeness has gone wide open as of July 1st. We've been a week in, and we both talked about it in our openings. But let's just sum up our initial thoughts of what this first week has been from our viewpoint as commentators and fans with the name, image, likeness. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think for me, there was obviously the flurry right when the NCAA and their infinite wisdom waited till the last possible moment to really announce anything or do anything about what had been coming for quite some time. But I I think there was kind of the initial flurry and interest from everybody of, hey, are we going to see a bunch of people doing something? And I think on the football side, you may see guys move a little bit quicker just because the season is sooner. I know some of the guys have come out and kind of designed logos. This is not really an IU thing, but I know like Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma was one of the first ones that, had his own logo and different stuff like that. So I think you saw a little bit quicker movement on some of those things. But from an IU perspective, I don't think there's been a ton of things, and I don't know if that's just folks with the athletic department saying, hey, let us go through some of the educational pieces that we talked about before and make sure we're setting you up for success in this and get these things in place. So don't go jump into a bunch of stuff right out of the gate. But I think even in general, it doesn't seem like there's been a ton of people outside of those first couple of days that you've really seen. So I think you saw a lot of news really kind of bubble up as that happened. But I think now it feels like players are just trying to figure out what their options really are and what are some different things they can do. And I think that feels like a good thing to me in terms of not jumping in and saying, hey, I'm going to go take everybody that comes to me. I'm going to go do something. And at the end, I got 15 different things that I'm endorsing and doing whatever. It feels like they're sitting back and trying to understand different pieces of it. There are certainly going to be opportunities for guys within Bloomington to be able to do some of those things. And I think that you will see guys take advantage of those opportunities, but it seems like at least from an IU perspective right now, it's a little bit, maybe not wait and see, I guess, but just kind of information gathering at this point and not a ton of activity. And I think in general, doesn't feel like you've heard as much about it. Everybody those first couple of days, like, oh, this guy, this quarterback in the SEC, did this sweet tea ad, and somebody at North Carolina had something with a restaurant and did whatever. And like that stuff all happened pretty quickly. The Bohannon and the fireworks, of course. Yeah, we'd be remiss not to mention that in a Big Ten one, but it seemed like that stuff all happened really fast. And then there hasn't been a whole lot else. At least that's kind of made waves as different things are happening. So I think a lot more to be seen, but a lot of bark, maybe not a lot of bite so far to the at the beginning.
Yeah, the two things with my initial thoughts this past week is I thought the bigger schools and the bigger athletes would dominate right away. Like people would have those players in mind and kind of working behind the scenes and get deals. And that really hasn't really materialized on a great sense across the country. I read an article today on CBSSports.com about Florida athletes getting some endorsements. A booster at Miami is going to pay $500 per football scholarship per month to advertise his MMA fighting training facility. So you've heard some of those, but what has surprised me nationally is some of the smaller college and maybe revenue sport athletes that have been able to get deals. And some have been big. There was a basketball player at an HBCU that got $1 million endorsement for something I saw. So I think those are the outliers. And like you said, I think a lot of people are taking their time and making sure that they do things correctly. And I think that's really important. The other thing that really, from my vantage point, that's impressive, and we both talked about it in our opening, is the fact that Indiana is really here for our student athletes and preparing them and doing a good job of connecting with the open doors. And I think it's Altus, the companies I've read about. And again, I'm sorry that I'm not as super well versed in that as other people we have on the show, but that is impressive to me as an alum of the university, is that we knew this was coming down the road. We put things in place. Jeremy Grace put that they've been tweeted that they've been working on it for 52 weeks and not just 2 days before. They were well ahead of the game. That's just impressive. I know that doesn't win in a box score necessarily, but maybe down the road it does influence athletes to come and do things correctly. So those are a couple of thoughts. I want to go back to something you said in your opening, Miller Kopp, and I'm putting you on the spot. So but I think the education that Indiana athletes are getting through Indiana University athletics and open doors and other things is to do this correctly. And you had like a 4-step process that Miller Kopp mentioned. And I think you're going to see a lot of athletes that might be the correct way to handle this name, image, and likeness. Do you have that available? Again?
Yeah, I do. I almost got there. I had it pulled up before, and then of course I stopped. Yeah. So basically, the series of tweets that he had was essentially, to take advantage of this. NIL is here to take advantage of this. I'll be putting out more content such as workouts, day-to-day activities, hobbies, teammate interactions, interviews, and much more. So that's kind of what we saw within his first vlog. So I guess maybe in retrospect, he was kind of teasing that a little bit, but he basically said, here's the 4 goals that I have. So one was be authentic. And he said, authenticity creates the right kind of opportunity. I'm looking to give my audience a clear look into my life as a college athlete. So number 2, tell my story. Athletes have hundreds and thousands of stories. I intend to share the stories of my audience in the most genuine way possible. I want to connect with the thousands of kids with the dream to play college basketball and help them achieve their dream. 3 is engage. I want to engage with my audience from Indiana University basketball fans to my hometown family and friends and basketball lovers all over. And 4 was align. I want to align myself with brands, people, and businesses who respect my brand, my worth, and my future as well. If you have suggestions as to what videos, content, kind of soliciting some of that, gave people ways how to connect with him. And then probably what IU fans liked most was he finished it up by saying, with that being said, always know that my work and dedication to the game of basketball will always come first. So it feels like, kind of a microcosm of the stuff that we talked about that the athletic department is trying to do and trying to help out, where giving people a plan to be successful and kind of play a little bit of the long game, opposed to, again, just kind of taking the first thing that comes. So, Miller puts out his first vlog this week, I think it was about 4 minutes long, some different behind the scenes stuff of a day going to practice and different things like that. Showed him hitting a bunch of 3-pointers. So that makes everybody happy, of course, but, kind of scratch the surface and I'm sure he'll look back and as he does more of these probably say, oh, I wish I did this different or whatever, but he's kind of showing his process throughout, of different things. I think you'll see different segments of that as it goes. And so I was impressed with, the first one of putting it together. Depending upon how he's doing that and putting it together, he's learning the skills to do that or working with the right people to kind of present things in a way that he wants. And then I think opens up what I think we talked about a little bit before the show, which was, he's kind of building out this brand. He talks about, I want to align with people who are in line with my beliefs and what I want to do. He's able to put that out and then figure out, okay, yeah, can I get endorsements? Can I get ads? Can I do sponsorships through this series? After he gets a couple out, gives people an idea of what they're, would be supporting and sponsoring and whatever else. So I think it's an interesting approach. Whether other guys do similar things or everybody takes their own spin on it to try to do it. But I think you can kind of put that together with him and at least say, hey, this seems to be a plan in place that he's using to kind of get his voice out there, and open up the opportunities for himself and kind of get that there. So I think that was a good approach. And again, kind of not sprinting right out of the gate, but trying to figure out, what are different things and building some of that slowly.
And I would imagine that's the 4-step process that you mentioned there from Miller Kopp is what is being shared with Indiana athletes. And the reason I say that is I listen to a podcast, and I know this is a person that no one likes on here, but Jeff Goodman with his Field of 68 podcast, this was a month or so ago, looking forward to the NIL release. They had someone on who is specialized in this, and they talked about exactly what Miller Kopp is doing. And they said, you've got to be able to tell your story and then fit any of these endorsements in around telling your story. And they work with professional athletes and draft picks in the NFL. And they said, the idea of a brand is really just telling your story. And that's what advertisers want. And if you build a brand, whether it's on social media or somewhere else, people are going to want to follow. Like that Miller Kopp vlog was fun. And I know people know that I'm not a big fan of videos. I want wins and losses, but it does give insight into what the locker room looks like. A little bit of the relationship with the players. You saw the 3-point shots going in. Those things will draw attention to Miller Kopp's social media, and the more people that come to his social media, then advertisers see that. And the long haul, as you said, then you get so much per engagement with your social media. And so you can't just be a social media person and all you do is advertise. You got to have a story. And that's, I know there was some concern here in the chat about the brand. What does it mean, a brand, and all of those things? But you got to tell your story, and then you got to tell your story and endorse things that are really who you're about, and not just take a $50 gift card for free wings or whatever because it's open to you. And so that was impressive, and I'm glad that you brought that up in the opening segment and had that available here, because I think that's really what professional consultants and agents who are involved with this are going to tell their athletes, to make sure you're doing this in the long haul. So that's pretty impressive. The other, what Parker Stewart had a food delivery coupon that people could use, so he's going to get a piece of that. Was that GoPuff or something like that? You saw athletes try to become Barstool athletes. I don't know what the payment agreement is with Barstool. Something called Yoke Gaming, where you could play video games with athletes for a charge. There are all kinds of things being thrown out as possibilities. The one that I really think has some potential, and I'm glad the players get a piece of it, is I call it special moment gear, like game-winning shots, like the Watt shot. You had Watford shooting a three. He could, put his picture out there and sell, and people would buy that, and then Watford gets some money for that. Penix, the dive to the pylon, Keith Smart shot. Those are some of the things that those college athletes could have maybe profited from in the past. So those are some examples of what we've seen in the so far in the first week. Michael Penix has signed with a company called Dreamfield, and they organize his appearances. And right now he is, according to social media, $500 an hour for an appearance at your store or at your place of business, which is quite a bargain compared to some other quarterbacks around. So those are some name, image, likeness things that I've seen. Andy, thoughts on any of that as far as the first week here?
Yeah, I think the shirts and that kind of stuff that you mentioned, it was interesting, because I think it was Matt Norlander that brought that up on the CBS podcast maybe last week, right after it went live, and talked about some of the, if you think about some of the NCAA tournament upsets, UMBC was, I think, the one that he brought up, like, how could you merchandise stuff around that as a player to to be able to do some of that kind of thing. You think back to, Vermont, the Sorrentine from the parking lot, like, could you, do stuff like that where you could build out some shirts and be able to do things like that. So I think those are some interesting, capitalize on a big moment that would be out there, whether that's in the tournament or a big shot during the season. I think, you think about some of the Jimmer Fredette type stuff when he was a phenomenon, when he was at BYU. I think I ordered a shirt off somebody online that they'd made for that, they were just making the shirt. He was not getting a cut of that, different things like that. So I think some cool opportunities there, both for the athlete's perspective and also for fans to be able to, that's something people can buy and not spend a ton of money on, versus some of these other things where you may not really be able to do this, but also just ways for people to support student athletes that they like. If you get a shirt like that or something like that, again, it's something that you benefit from. They get a little cut of it and different things like that. So I was interested in that part of it as much as some of the other stuff. But yeah, I'll be curious as more comes out and this gets a little bit more defined, some of maybe the astronomical numbers that are associated with some players either making appearances or signing autographs or doing whatever. But just kind of fun to track at this point.
It'd be interesting, like the Cameo, the audio clips, some of the things, how many players want to be involved with that? Who do they want to endorse? I've seen athletes across the country already, endorse fan pages on Twitter and that. So, you can see that at what you charge $50 or $100 to do a tweet or an Instagram story or something to promote web pages and something like that. But the issue for the players from my perspective is what to endorse and when to endorse it. And we've talked about long game versus short game. Do you take quick money because someone knocks on your door, or that's an old man statement, hits you up in the DMs or whatever happens with the young people? And then how to maintain your reputation. And then you got to learn business issues, right? And some people brought that up as a negative. Well, these kids got to learn how to pay taxes. Well, you know what? I had to learn how to pay taxes when I was 22 and started working, and probably a little bit earlier when I had summer work as well. So I find those things to be real trivial, those negatives about NIL, the tax issues and kids learning that. I mean, if you can go to college and be on a college campus, you might not be able to figure out the 1040, but you're smart enough to go to, someone who can figure it out. But the key thing
Go to
And
Megan. She'll help you. She can
go to
help.
Megan.
That's
Absolutely.
what she needs to do. She needs to get herself, in with
That's
the
right.
athletic department. Can be the official like tax advisor for these players. So,
is managing the distraction. And I don't find that to be a negative because you can't put players. I mean, we were in a bubble and teams won and teams lost. And you have distractions on college campuses. It's called beer, and parties and, people you're attracted to. So there's distractions all around, and your great athletes can show up and go to work and play the game. Your average athletes allow distractions to get in the way and don't prepare. This is just an additional distraction. But running your business, running your brand, I don't know that that'll be a distraction from the player issue. Any thoughts on some of those things that we may have heard about NIL?
Yeah, to me, that's part of life. I mean, you're having to manage different responsibilities and prioritize things, and not overextend yourself to try to do, get caught up sponsoring too many different things or having too many appearances where you're kind of running yourself ragged. I mean, maybe there will be hiccups for people as part of that, but to me, that is ultimately part of the learning experience. No different than the tax piece, right? Like, you're going to have to learn to do that at some point in the not too distant future when you're a student in college. And for those who are working and putting themselves through college and some of those things, that's something people are already doing. So,
right.
To me, as long as that's, again, this goes back to IU and based on what they've done so far, I don't think there's a reason to believe they don't have a support system in place to help people with those things, because yes, some of those things are new concepts to these folks, but I don't think it shouldn't be presented as a reason not to do something. And as much as as much of a learning experience as anything, at least the way that I look at it, and the introduction to figuring some things out. And I think there'll be lessons learned from players, from people who are sponsoring the players, from all around. I mean, it's uncharted territory in that regard, but I think it provides some good opportunities for them, both financially, but also just from a life skills standpoint. So I feel like we're two old guys like sitting on our porch, like yelling at people at this point. But I guess I don't know. Just to act like these kids can't handle that, or these young adults can't handle that, I think is doing them a disservice as well, that it's going to be too much for them to handle. They have to figure that out. We all have to figure those things out.
Absolutely. And it's education about a lot of things, and you're going to endorse the wrong product, or you're going to, do something and it's going to backfire on you. And through those struggles, you're going to learn that, okay, I shouldn't have done that, and move on. And you're going to find good deals and you're going to find bad deals. You're going to engage with people who want to take advantage of who you are and things like that. But that's what happens every day to a lot of us as we go to work and enter into contracts and deals. So, if you're going to benefit, there's some learning in this. Some other things that I've heard and read in articles that are some concerns is what's it going to do to team chemistry, and is someone going to be jealous of someone making the extra money? Well, those issues have been around forever. If you're the ninth man and the guy ahead of you scoring 20 points a game and the coach is calling plays for him all the time, that can be a potential problem. The best teams have a way to get through that, and coaches have a way to try to manage that. So those issues are around all the time anyway. I don't think that this adds an additional problem with that. The one that'll be interesting to me that I read about this week is, does the advertising money start to dwindle from the athletic departments, and does it hurt some of the non-revenue sports that benefit from some of this advertising money, because the advertising money is going directly to players instead of the athletic programs? I don't know. I don't know how much money is going to flow into this. Obviously, the Miami booster, who's going to pay $540,000 a year to 90 football players at $500 a month. If he was given $200,000-$300,000 to the Miami athletic department, that may have an impact somewhat, but I think that's something you just got to work through.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. You could see some of that, but it's also these, from a company perspective, as I think about maybe individual boosters, maybe that's not true. And maybe there's some, I think a lot of people have made the point of, well, this money was getting to them under the table. Now it's just over the table. But from a company perspective, there's a lot of people, a lot of companies who want to be associated with IU sports, and that will go on after the players that are there now have left. So I don't know how much of your funding that you have for that kind of thing that you really want to flow into people who won't be there for a lengthy period of time versus I think there may be some other things that, from an individual player standpoint. So maybe that's not thinking of it the right way, but I don't know that will have a huge impact on it. And I think to your point, the whole, this guy's making a lot more than the next guy, in some form or fashion, that kind of stuff is already taking place, whether it's playing time, whether it's whatever. I think you're going to have those kinds of things. I think it was Titus and Tate. They talked about that part of it as well, or maybe it was a CBS, maybe it was both. But yeah, there's always those kinds of dynamics in terms of the team. I think guys know the general pecking order of different guys. So I don't think that's there. I think if there are issues with that, it probably speaks to other issues that were already there with the team, that just exaggerates things that were maybe already flawed about that. And so I don't necessarily think it's going to have a huge hit to team chemistry. Because if it does, I'm not so sure that the foundation that the chemistry was built on was all that strong to begin with. But that's my 2 cents on that piece, at least.
There's a question that came through, I believe, on Periscope or something. Corey, it's a really good question. Do you think some schools will push players away from getting involved in NIL to focus on the sport? And I don't think they'll push them away, but I think it's just like anything. As a head coach, you're responsible for them making good decisions. So it's no different than saying, hey, you know what? You need to be better academically. You need to show up doing grade checks, making sure people are showing up for class. You're going to have someone on your staff or in the athletic department that's monitoring these NILs and the activities. And if someone is a distraction, if I'm a coach and someone's distracted because they're out, they're late to practice because they're taking a vlog or doing a video, we're going to have a conversation. And I'm not going to say, hey, you got to stop doing that. You got to prioritize your time. And it goes back to the whole educational thing that we're talking about. In order to make money on this, the players are going to have to be successful and the teams are going to have to be successful at some point. So you can't sacrifice your weight training, your individual work, your teamwork to be this NIL person. So I don't know that coaches will push people away from the NIL. I do think that it is something that coaches are going to have to address that they didn't have to maybe in the past if it does become a distraction.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. I think it's something to monitor, but again, I think the assumption is made that guys have their priorities in the right order, and team success builds opportunities for individual things like that to happen. But and it seems like a number. I mean, like I said, that Miller Kopp said that. I think Xavier Johnson, put something out there as well. Like, don't let this stuff get in the way of what the ultimate goal really is. And so, I think that speaks a little bit to the character and the mindset of the kids. I don't think it's a good look for the school to try to push people away from that, as opposed to, again, the kind of educational piece of, hey, you need to, because the university is going to keep, it'll be like a compliance person in some regard, probably, of kind of monitoring all this stuff. And so they see somebody maybe start to get overextended or do some things like that. Then I think you've got somebody who can maybe call that out and rein them in a little bit. But again, I think that's part of the education process of, putting a framework in place where they can be successful in doing this without distracting from other priorities from in the classroom, on the court, on the field, stuff like that. So I think that's a little bit of the university job, but I also think things start to come out where it's, hey, the coach said I couldn't do this or certain things. I think there's probably boundaries though, in terms of, hey, this time is what we're doing for basketball. If you're going to do these things, here's, some guidelines to use around that kind of stuff. I think that part is totally fine to set some, ground rules around it. But I think ultimately you probably do yourself a disservice as a staff in a university by really trying to limit what people can do, because at some point that just gets used against you from a recruiting standpoint.
And Phil Davis had a question. We're going to move it up from section 3 into this one because it's about the NIL. And we talked about the first piece of it, changing the college basketball landscape, but he ended with, do you think it'll help or hurt IU? Your thoughts, Andy. Does IU benefit from NIL more than other programs in your opinion?
I mean, whether it's where they kind of fall in the pecking order, I don't know, but I think they definitely benefit from it toward the top end, particularly from a basketball standpoint, right? I mean, when you think about the fan base and all of the support that the team gets, I think you've got a kind of fertile ground to be able to get some of those endorsements because there's so much support and exposure of the program at that point. So I think in that regard, it just will generate a lot of opportunities because of how big IU basketball is within the Bloomington community, within Indiana, and things like that. So I think that inherently leads to more opportunities for more players to be able to do that. So I think in that regard, it's a positive thing. The tradition becomes a positive. The overall following of the program becomes a positive in the same way that it does at other top end schools, as you would look at it that way. So I think it helps a lot more than any bad that would come of it.
I think it helps. I think both in football with the LEO stuff, but the Cuban Center helps a ton too. That can produce some of this stuff and teach people how to do things. And then, Lene Phillips and Jeremy Gray have been on top of this stuff. They're just wonderful people working really hard to help promote Indiana basketball, Indiana football, all of the programs. And so I think that trickles down also to your non-revenue sports. So I think Indiana is a name, and I think the success in basketball and the brand, and Forbes come out a couple of weeks ago and said it's the third, most, popular brand in college basketball. I think that trickles down and helps. So coming up on in our third segment, we'll do some subscriber shout outs, then answer your non-basketball questions and basketball questions, plus the mediocre question of the week from Jay Horry. Stick around with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, good segment here. We'll get rolling here real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing overall.
Yeah, I think IU, I would like to think that because of how long they've been working at it and how much they've been out in front of it, are setting themselves up for it not to be a distraction and to have that framework there where it can be an asset and not a distraction. I mean, time will tell whether that's true or not, but it does feel like they've put in the work to be able to set people up for success and to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that they have with the support of the university and the folks that they partnered with to make it happen. So feels like a positive, whether you'll see that at other places or you'll see some pitfalls because people were less prepared than IU. And that's not to say that you won't see guys at IU, again, pick the wrong company to do something with that they didn't know something about or didn't research well. Like that's inevitable with the number of athletes and the number of opportunities that there are going to be. I think you're certainly going to see that at different places, but it hopefully is viewed by not only the players, but everybody else as a learning experience, as opposed to a reason to kind of chuck the whole thing up as a negative.
And if you do it well and it can show success with athletes and dollars, and for a variety of athletes like a TJD and a Penix, and obviously you'll get one level, but if you can show some success elsewhere and you have that educational piece, that's got to work in recruiting as well. And I know everyone's fighting for that piece. So it's, every school is going to have NIL people and their production. It just seems like IU has been out in front of it, and that's got to help. Denny asked if we're going to go down to how do you say it? Huber's Winery? Huber's Winery. I would love to. I haven't thought about it. It's a little bit of a drive for me, but I'm a teacher. I think that's in the summer before school starts. So I don't know what I have to do to get a spot, get a ticket. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I do not think I will, but I know Joel talked about coming to a tailgate. I definitely hope to do that if kids' sports schedules and the IU football schedule align this fall. I would love to be able to do that.
Yep. So, Dominic, I am not familiar. I've just been here in Delphi for about 10, 12 years, a little more than that maybe. I'll have to look those guys, those people up that you mentioned there, but I don't know. All right, let's go to our third segment, and here we go.
Hi, this is James Blackman Jr. I never miss an open three, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call. Go Hoosiers.
Welcome back. I'm the coach, Brian Tonsoni, here with Andy Bottoms. It's segment 3, which can mean only one thing.
Subscriber shout out, subscriber shout out.
Our first subscriber shout out comes from Owensboro, Kentucky. It's Darren Faulkner. Darren's favorite Hoosier of all time is Steve Alford, which means Darren must have been very frustrated the last few seasons watching Indiana shoot like it did. Darren's assembly call leader is everyone. He wrote, quote, "They're all great, too close to call." And for special acknowledgement, Darren wrote, quote, "Looking forward to the upcoming season with Coach Woodson. Like that we're getting back to our roots with Woodson and Fife." Thank you, Darren. I couldn't agree more on your last comment there. Our second subscriber shout-out comes from the home of Calbert Cheney and Christian Lander, Evansville, Indiana. It's Sally Henderson. Sally's favorite Hoosier is Joe Hillman. For the same reason, Coach is her favorite member of the assembly call. As Sally wrote, quote, that Joe Hillman has the best backside of all IU players since 1983, when I really started looking. Okay, Sally, thank you. I don't know I'm just going to keep reading the script. Sally made me blush on assembly call. For her assembly call leader, Sally chose Coach. Thanks, Sally. In addition to his Hillman-esque posterior, she writes that Coach is, quote, more my age and temperament. I get him and he gets basketball. Parentheses, Andy doesn't get to talk enough, or he might be my first choice. So the lesson here is Andy talk more and Ryan shut up more so Andy can talk more. Thank you, Sally. Woo. Yeah.
Hopefully this episode has we've gotten I've gotten to talk more tonight, Sally. So hopefully that doesn't change your mind and she wants it to go back to being less. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll find out. We'll wait for a follow-up.
I've been trying to reduce the size of my backside, but not anymore. If Sally appreciates that. So thank you, Sally. Okay, it's time for the rest of our mailbag. All questions were submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about and join at assemblycall.com/community.
It's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
All right. I hung out with Jay on Tuesday night at a comedy club, and it wasn't mediocre. But his questions are mediocre, and we do have one submitted from Jay. But anytime you get a chance to hang out with Jay and his lovely wife, Hillary, it's a great evening. But Jay's mediocre question is this. It's straight from the best show ever made, Ted Lasso. If you had to sacrifice, throw it in a fire, one meaningful item to end the IU basketball national championship curse, what would that item be? It doesn't have to be IU related. It just has to mean something to you. That's tough.
That is a tough question. I thought of it initially more from an IU perspective. I guess if I was thinking from a IU memorabilia standpoint, there's a hat I have that got autographed by Calbert Cheney and Greg Graham and I think I've gotten a couple other guys to autograph over time. I think Knight might be on there as well. I guess that might be the kind of piece of memorabilia I'd have that I would add to that. I don't know if I have I don't feel like I have a great answer for that. You got anything better? I see you kind of scanning the room.
Yeah, I'm scanning the man cave here. I might throw my tailgate bar in the old fire if I can get a national championship, and we'll just burn it at the tailgate spot in a big bonfire, celebrating after we run down to the fountain. So that might be the answer there. All right, so let's move through these. I think there might have been one on Twitter, Andy, too. If you could get the assembly call Twitter account up. Yep. I didn't copy that on if you would do that. But anyway, Terrence Kensel says, what is the status of the IU exhibition games this summer? Also, with the games beyond the radio, I heard IU is supposed to face some decent competition. Is this true? I think there's 2 games scheduled for the Bahamas. The competition is a team. Is it a pro team? I believe. I'm not sure. I think that's the case. So the competition is pretty good. I do not believe there will be radio or television coverage. The only way to see IU is to travel down to the Bahamas, which they do have packages available, I think, through Indiana at this time. Anything you know about the exhibition games?
Yeah, I don't believe, at least the last that I saw, that there was going to be coverage of any kind, much to probably everyone's chagrin. But I'd imagine they'll do some video stuff after the fact. But I don't believe there's going to be any kind of like live broadcast on BTN or anything of that nature. So that's really all that I know. I do think, to your point, it is a professional team. I forget from what country, but I do think competition wise should be a relatively good test. I think one of the things that came out as I'm thinking through it when they first announced it was, one, that they weren't playing a ton of games because I think you have the opportunity to play more, and 2, that there weren't some teams that you would surely beat up on in that scenario. But again, I don't know what your options are in terms of like having the how many teams would come. So yeah, there are definitely travel packages I think the university's putting together to do it, to go down to Atlanta. So if you really want to watch the games and you've got the extra money, I think that's your best bet. I don't believe there'll be any other streams or really anything that's there. I would imagine there'll be some media there to cover it. I think Alex said that Tyler Toshman is going down to cover it for Inside the Hall, so you'll be able to get some recaps and stuff like that from those outlets, but I don't know that there'll be a great way to watch or listen to it.
Chat Mob seems to think it's a pro team from Serbia. So, but it's
really, we
be,
should throw these questions to the Chat Mob. They have a lot better answers.
Yeah, just have them answer, and we'll just read them up.
Yeah, Serbia. This one's that it's on some other channel. You can only have limited clips, so. Knowledgeable
group in this chat.
Absolutely.
Lee Butler brings up the University of Miami supporter guaranteeing the $500 per month, and he has a bidding for football, basketball players' talents begun. I'll mention it's always been there. Supposedly before the NIL, your 5 stars went to Kentucky and Duke and whatever. And whether you believe there were bag drops or not, or money under the table or not, the best athletes have gone to the better programs. Alabama gets a lot of good athletes, whether that's been above the board or not. I don't think that's changed. I do think it'll influence people. Your thoughts on, is it a bidding war, or is it just something else to add to the recruiting landscape?
Yeah, I tend to think it's a bit more of the, some of the under the table stuff just becoming more out in the open. The Miami thing is interesting because you certainly wonder if other schools will try to follow suit or do similar things, but I don't know that if you wanted to round up that money and funnel it to somebody before that you had that much trouble doing it. So I think that's something people can do, and you may see more of that, but I don't know that it makes me worried that much more. It doesn't make me feel any differently about the NIL stuff than I did before I knew about it, I guess.
Robert Creighton asks, are we watching the NBA free throw shooters? His observation is that the arch of the ball has to enter the hoop at 45% or more. Then they make 90% of their free throws. This is common knowledge. So why do coaches not concentrate on teaching this skill? I see no evidence that they are doing so. A flat shot or a bullet shot has zero tolerance. And there are electronic devices to chart that. Why don't the schools spend money for that? Robert, I don't know a coach that has taught any kind of shooting that doesn't teach, proper arc on the basketball. And there are all kinds of devices now that measure it. I would imagine the colleges have what they feel that they need. It just comes down to maybe if you wanted to find some fault in a coach, is do they put into practice free throws under stress? How much do they emphasize free throw shooting as a valuable tool? That's probably more of why you would maybe find fault in a coach for free throw shooting for his team. But I don't know someone from youth coaches to whoever who doesn't use that common knowledge. And that's one of the quick fixes when someone is missing.
Yeah,
Phil Davis,
I think to your point, Coach, just real quick. I mean, I think two things are at play. Some of those are, late to your point, some of the late game fatigue situations where your form kind of slacks a little bit can lead to some of that. But I also think, you get into the NBA, a lot of these guys, like it emphasizes the importance of focusing on shot form early and not letting that deteriorate, because the older you are and the further you get, like, you're not going to rework somebody's shot once they're in the NBA, at least not very often. You're not, or not successfully. You could certainly try. So it just kind of puts the emphasis back on those kinds of fundamentals, because when you get into bad habits in those scenarios, I mean, it's no different than any other part of life. As we all get older, if you get into bad habits, they get harder and harder to get out of as you go forward with that. So I don't know that it's a lack of emphasis or that kind of thing, but I just think it's some of it is just habits that guys really struggle to break. And if you're it's one of the things I talk about with kind of projecting as the NBA. If you're a bad free throw shooter in college, they don't really project that you're able to become a decent 3-point shooter as you move to the next level and some of those kinds of things. And I think there's reasons to believe that when you look at some of the habits and things like that.
Rick Watson, what recent recruits have IU missed out on? I know Justin Taylor. Has Kyle Filipowski decided to go somewhere? Someone mentioned he might have. I know he went to visit Duke.
But it said something about Duke, but I looked it up. I did not see anything
yet
that said a commitment that I saw. But
so the only one so far that is committed somewhere else that has been on a visit or had us in the top right now, I think, is Justin Taylor, the only one who's decided to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and then Colvin committed to Purdue this week, so I know
right.
IU had offered him. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, but I don't know that I don't know where IU was on his radar, so I don't know that I'd count that in the miss the same way that like Taylor had IU in his final 5 or whatever it was. But yeah, I double checked that I didn't miss something on Filipowski, but I don't believe he's committed anywhere at this point.
We're getting down to Phil, and I'm not sure which recruit you ended up talking about, Phil, in the community. You had a couple, but I'm just going to talk in general about when you hear certain things that go on in the recruiting about advisors or their group of people of when someone was offered, or if IU offered a certain player before someone else. What are my thoughts? Personally, Phil, if I hear that a player is upset of when he gets an offer, then I think he ought to go somewhere else. That's just old Coach Tonsoni. Son, you better be blessed that Indiana offered you. If it's too late, keep it to yourself and go somewhere else. But the fact that you're only going to go to a school, obviously you're going to go to a school that has a longer relationship, so that's going to be a factor, and I don't have a problem with that. But getting upset because someone else was offered before you, that does speak volumes to me as a concern. But the other thing is I'm old. And a lot of these kids and a lot of their coaches and AAU, they all have egos, and we all have egos. Coaches have egos too. And sometimes with social media, you fire off something that you hear right away, and it's kind of hard to pull that back. And then everyone takes a screenshot of it. So there's a lot more to the character of these recruits than just a single tweet or something that we hear in social media. That's awful hard for me, Phil, to understand, because I do think I do think character matters, and I think character matters sometimes before you even push the first tweet button. I have old man issues with some of that, but sometimes you got to give kids second, third chances and people around them. And sometimes you don't hold the kid accountable for the advisors or parents. If you go to an AAU tournament, man, the parents are screaming and yelling. I know some coaches won't recruit players because of that, but you got to look at the kid and over the long haul over certain things. But in general, if someone's really bothered by, who talked to who first, then they're going to have problems with playing time and practice and things like that. So You had a couple names in there, and I'm just going to keep those names out of it. But whoever that was, that would be a concern if it was genuinely a problem. If it was just a one-off quick tweet by someone, then I would dismiss it a little bit. Andy, any thoughts on that?
No, I don't really have anything to add other than what you said on that one. We can move along.
Valerie said the Delta variant of COVID-19 has me worried. I'm worried that the folks will be excluded from games from the beginning super spreader events. I know you can't really answer this, but it has me concerned since Indiana's near the bottom of the percentage of population vaccinated. Your thoughts on that real quick?
I think it's probably too early to tell how that will impact things. So I think at this point, certainly for fall sports, football, I think being outside helps a lot of those kinds of things. And then I'm sure the university will reassess where things are at that point. But I don't feel like I know enough to feel worried or anything else as we go forward and look at it that way. So I'm trying to be optimistic that things will work out as everything rolls around and be able to have things in person, crowds back and all those kinds of things.
I know Indiana and a lot of places are at 100% capacity or planning for 100% capacity. I think we just got to roll with that. I will say, Valerie, that some of the recent news about some of this does have you wondering if in 2 or 3 months in certain areas that there's a pullback. I will deal with that when it happens. But right now, I was glad to go to the St. Louis Cardinals with my son, who's a Cardinals fan, and be in a pro stadium and hotel and restaurants and bars. We're going to a concert next week. I made the choice to get vaccinated. That has freed me up quite a bit to go to these types of places. So that's just my personal choice. I think we'll be okay. Hopefully in the fall. I need that tailgate bar to be moving south real quick. I miss everyone there. IU Artifacts asked, will the crew make a triumphant return to B-Town sometime during the hoop season? I think the answer is yes, Andy.
I think we certainly hope so. We'll see the schedule and kind of figure things out, but that is our that would be my intention, at least at this point. So hopefully it works out that way.
Chris, I'll be down quite a few times for football, and I'm going to be down a couple times in the summer. I'll have to hit you up, and we'll get together. Ken Overby says, of Galloway, Leo, Lander, and Geronimo, who is most likely to see appreciable more minutes this season?
I think this Lander feels like the clear choice here. To me, at least, I think the year of experience, kind of getting a little bit more, having some more opportunities, being able to maybe play alongside. Maybe he plays alongside Xavier Johnson. I think Woodson is going to be able to put him in a better position to be successful based on his skill set and his background, his recruiting pedigree. Maybe we'll find out that was not right in the first place when all is said and done. But I think if you still believe in that kind of stuff, and I think he showed enough flashes last year to suggest that he can be an effective player, then I think it's going to be him. Now, the backcourt's a little crowded when you got other guys who could be primary ball handlers, but if Finney moves off the ball a little bit more, feels like him. I think Geronimo is one that could take a leap depending upon how Woodson wants to play. I think he gives him some options defensively if he can continue to shoot it reasonably well. I think that he'd be the other possibility, at least in my view. Those would be, I'd probably rank them 1 and 2.
I think Lander, because I think Woodson likes his guards to attack, and I think he can use Lander's ability and maximize his attack. But I would not be surprised to see Geronimo. I think he's got an NBA type of body. I think he can guard the 4 and the 3, and I think he might be a surprise, get some surprise minutes at the 4 spot and use his athleticism. I think a lot of times we think of the other players on that freshman recruiting class, and I just think Geronimo might pop this season. Jeff Marlowe, Coach Marlowe said, IU football now has a top 25 recruiting class for the class of 22. How excited about or are you about the trajectory of IU football under Coach Allen?
I mean, it's pretty wild the success they've continued to have on the recruiting front, and I think they're doing a great job of capitalizing on the momentum that they had from last year and LEO and everything that goes with it. So I think what you really did not want to see was somehow not being able to really capitalize on the momentum that they had, despite the way the season ended in the bowl game and all those kinds of things. So it seems like they've been able to continue to progress in that way. At a minimum, competing with some big names on the recruiting trail from an opponent university standpoint, and beating them out in some of these scenarios as well, which is not territory with which IU has operated too often in the past. But I think there's a lot of excitement there for both this year's team and the future with the way things are going with Coach Allen.
The recruiting is just solidifying. I've been real slow to Coach Allen, and I know that I'm on the very far end of that, and a lot of people aren't with me on that. I've just been very slow. The results on the field have been tremendous and moved me towards that. This recruiting deal is just solidifying that. I thought they really handled the change in offensive coordinators well. I think they're going to handle the change in defensive coordinators this year well. I think 7-5, 8-4 is a continuation of the great progress. So, I don't need to see 10-2 or 9-3. If that's the case, I think that'll be fantastic. But I'm kind of excited to get back into Memorial Stadium and see the Hoosiers. I'll be at Kinnick Stadium in Iowa. So we're going to travel out there for the first game, and we're looking to that. Our last question is from on Twitter. The handle Ghost of a Ghost. Who would win if we split up the squads? The returning team of Lander Finney, Leo Galloway, Jordan Race, and TJD versus the new guys, Scoop, Parker, Kopp, Duncombe, and Durr. That is not easy.
So there was part of this question. He had flagged some guys as starters, but there were not 5 on each team. So I wasn't really sure about that. So I'm just going to take it that it's a 5-on-5 contest between the two. Yeah, it's definitely it's interesting that the returnees would have a huge advantage inside with Race and TJD going up against Durr, who's got some experience, but I'm not sure how well he would match up with TJD. Duncombe, do you play Kopp on Race Thompson, something like that? So that becomes a little bit tricky in that regard. But on the flip side of that, the shooting of the new team and the perimeter play between shooting wise, Scoop, Parker, and Kopp plus Xavier Johnson running the point would make it interesting. As Ghost of a Ghost says, their take is close, but the point is there's a general upgrade on talent in the roster, which is amusing. So I think that part is good. I guess if I had to, I'd take the returnees just because they got a little more experience. They got a little more depth. Figure I'll take the team with the best player in TJD. So I guess I'll take the returning guys. What about you?
I'm going with the new team because it's a guards game. And I like all 13 of our guys. So it's kind of hard for me to sit here, but you got to be able to handle the ball. You got to be able to shoot the ball. And I think Durr being a 7-footer would make TJD's life a little difficult inside. And I just think Kopp and Parker and Tamar Bates, and that would be, even though Finney defensively is there, I just think college basketball is a guards game, and I would take the new team. But I do agree that it's extremely close for all the reasons you stated.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
Well, that'll do us for this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next week or sooner if anything breaks. Until then,
take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
You might get beat today, but each day you got to get better.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it. Can't wait to see you on the sidelines. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in on a summer night, Thursday night. And
yeah, absolutely. Appreciate everybody joining us. Lots of good questions for sure.
That's been a big
and lots of help from
it really has,
and lots of help from the chat and answering the questions too, which is equally important.
Yeah, we have to give credit to the real
that we don't think about.
The real truth is in the people who sit back there and can either know or can quickly find the answers for us. So we do appreciate that. But in all honesty, the members of the community and Twitter, those questions have been coming in the off season. The off season is very difficult sometimes to get in a flow of topic after topic after topic. So dependent on what breaks news wise. We don't want to go through it too much. We were a little bit fortunate with the coaching change and some of the recruiting stuff coming in and out to give us some stuff in the spring. But in the summer, it gets a little tough to find topics. And your questions are always a way to end the show on a good note. So we thank you for that.
Yeah, for a while there, it felt like the flow of news was going to be constant and everything there for those few weeks. It was pretty quite crazy, but yeah, it has in some ways good, kind of leveled off a little bit and get the team in Bloomington and get into work.
What do we have coming up? The schedule is the next news to break, and then whenever they decide to start.
Yeah, somebody put in the chat somebody put in the chat about the schedule that that typically IU didn't release their full schedule. Well, obviously the full schedule they wouldn't until the Big Ten does theirs, which is around Labor Day, which I think actually now that I think about it is correct. I think there's a lot of other schools who announce their non-conference piece of their schedule and then just kind of wait and tack other stuff on. But it doesn't feel like IU typically does that. Now, the flip side of that is there's another team they're playing in every game. So as other teams release their non-conference schedules, you might be able to piece together certain aspects of that, which I think has been the case in the past. So be curious if we at least get news on another couple games that they would have as they kind of compile the non-conference piece of things.
A little bit of recruiting news might break here and there as the last open periods flow here in July. At least, we'll get Dane Fife tweeting about what media members are angling for their spots in the sidelines of the Peach Jam and everything else. I thought that was a fun exchange from Coach Fife. And then the 10 practices, hopefully we'll hear some things and have some media availability when they start their practices for the Bahamas trip. And at least we'll have some of that to talk about in the fall. And then before you know it, it'll be back to regular stuff. So,
yeah, not too long for your trip to Iowa City, even for the football side of things. So,
yeah, I got to get tickets. Kathy Amos bought tickets, and I haven't got my tickets yet because I was waiting to see if Amy's going to be able to go and want to go, and I think she is. So we got our hotel room, and that's a fun place. I've been 2 or 3 times. So
awesome.
Did you listen to the Crean interview on Hoosier Hysterics?
I did. I didn't,
but it was anything interesting.
I mean, there's, I find that most any of those that I listen to, there'll always be a few interesting nuggets. I think there's certainly some who probably don't have a strong desire to hear a lot of what he has to say, but there was interesting parts of it. I don't think it's going to change people's opinion of him one way or the other. I guess I'll put it that way. And I don't really mean that to be a negative about it, but I don't think there's a lot there that's going to change people's opinions of him is probably the way to put it. But so anyway, I guess that's maybe the easiest thing to say.
All righty. Well, that'll do it for us, everyone. I got to get this off for production. We do appreciate you keep in touch. Richie in the chat mob got seats right next to me, so he can make sure I make it in. That's his main job now, is to make sure I'm on track to make it into the games, and he can carry me into section 11, row 30. So, Richie, I'm glad you got seats next to me. That's going to be a good thing coming up this fall. So, all right, everybody. Good night.